Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with another episode of Weighing In, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Back with the boys in full force. We are creeping up on college starting, but we have big news on the international side. First of all, boys, good morning. How are you?
Doing great, boss.
Marco, life good?
Grant, how'd the golf outing go?
Historic, biggest moneymaker that Grandview's ever had. We had a full roster, full teams. You know, we had, can't think of the stat line, but it was like the most ever hole sponsors we've ever had. We had a title sponsor, Trigon Shipping or Trigon Trucking, that was our title sponsor for the event. Just a humongous, just big win for GB Wrestling. So,
anybody
we also played golf too.
There you go. Anybody on the organizational side of that you want to give a shout out to for making it happen?
Oh, just the guys that are actually full-time on staff, Nick Mitchell, Paul Reedy, Grant Henderson, all of the alumni, the people at Toad Valley Golf Course and Country. We had a whole bunch of helpers, and like our SID, Nat was there. Our managers, everybody was basically out and about. And Jim Miller, I think the executive director of the Dan Gable Wrestling Museum in Waterloo, came down to support. He was Nick Mitchell's coach when he was at Wartburg. Also, just a humongous wrestling advocate, and does a really good job of supporting all of the local colleges within the state. So huge shout out to Millboy.
Yeah, for sure. He's a legend. So, okay. So congratulations on that. That's freaking awesome. Let's start out with, I guess, the news of the day, which I had told you guys about 2 weeks ago. Zach Esposito is the new developmental coach for USA Wrestling. Funny behind-the-scenes conversation, I called Gary Abbott and said, hey, just validating this is true. And he was funny and said, how do you know that? And I'm like, I just know. And he said, well, you got to wait till Oklahoma State announce it. So very interesting move. Espo's been at Oklahoma State for, I think, 21 years between his time as an athlete and as a coach, individual national champion, team national champion 4 times, I think, as an athlete, and 4 or 5 times as a coach. So super impressive resume. He takes over for James Green. James Green's last tournament is basically now going on, which we'll talk about, and or just finished, because he's not the women's or the Greco coach. And then James Green is going not only to compete, but to be the assistant coach at Nebraska. And Kokish was the odd man out there. So, Mark, thoughts on Espo's change and JG moving?
Well, I'm happy for both of them. I think, James Green, you could see the writing on the wall that he was going to be an assistant coach at Nebraska. I don't think there's any other way they would have got him.
Right.
To make that big move. I know he still wants to compete. I think he's healthy. I think you'll see him compete for another world title before he's done, probably in 2 years, because I don't think he's going to go down a weight for an Olympic weight. So
he's not. I talked to him. He's not.
Yeah, so that'll be – I think that he'll do a great job at Nebraska. I think Manning's a good mentor for him. He's done a good job with that program. They consistently are a top 10 team now, so that's impressive. Esposito to, I don't know enough about him as a coach. I haven't seen the development that he's done, so I really don't have anything to say. I know he was a phenomenal wrestler. I know Oklahoma State has one of the storied programs in the world, in the country. So, I don't think it's going to be a bad call, but we'll find out, because I thought James Green just knocked it out when he got there. For that short time he was there, he did a phenomenal job.
GT?
I know that USA Wrestling is extremely happy to have Espo into the fold. He's done a really good job at the U16 junior level throughout his career and being on staffs to travel to Worlds. Been a very good installation part of USA Wrestling in years past. Once again, he's been with Oklahoma State for a really, really, really long time as an athlete and as a coach. So I think it's a great win for USA Wrestling. He's young. He can still, does a really good job of relating to kids, very similar in the same breath of how James Green was, kind of in that same mix of like kind of done competing. I think also just as a loss to Oklahoma State's program, he's been a journeyman since, he basically arrived on campus a long, it's not that long ago. He's my age. So like, I don't want to say it's like he's ancient, but like he's been a part of that. He's been a part of Stillwater's community for an extremely long time. Right. And to your guys' point and Mark's point, during his tenure, they were, one of the greatest collegiate wrestling teams and dynasties while those guys were in school with, Johnny Hendricks, Jake Rochholt, Chris Pendleton, Steve Mako, just to name a few of his teammates, Coleman Scott, just a really, really good collegiate presence. And then, now once again, moving on to the USA Wrestling platform, which I think is going to be great for him.
Yeah. So a couple thoughts on my side. Number one, he goes from being at Oklahoma State where like the Iowas, the Penn States, the Ohio States, basically everybody else in the country, I wouldn't say doesn't like him, but, doesn't want him having access to those kids, to now being the gatekeeper where all these guys are going to go through to him. And the U17 and the U15 coaching jobs are the best jobs for a college coach to have. Like, there's certain people that have done those trips several times, and that's where you can make great inroads in recruiting. You also can figure out, like, anybody that's making those teams are good. But when you're around them, you see who handles pressure right, who treats people with respect, just a bunch of different things like that. So, people that he was competing with, I wouldn't say enemies, but, definitely opponents now become his friends. Certainly puts Oklahoma State in a good spot because, obviously him and John are still going to be friends and everything else. And then a friend of mine texted me this morning, and we're not saying this is true, but he said that Willie Saylor is saying that Coleman Scott is going to take the Espo job and Tony Ramos would become the interim coach at North Carolina. That's not validated. That's not fact. But Willie put it out on his pod, so he must think it's true. I talked to my folks in Stillwater and asked them about that, and they said, well, as of Monday, and today is Thursday, that wasn't the case. But obviously, decisions like that can happen quickly. So that would certainly be an interesting development if we talk about, if that's the case, we'll certainly talk about that more next week. But a lot of things going on down there in Stillwater. So, I agree with you, Mark. JG did a great job. I think Kevin Jackson did a great job. I think that's an interesting job. Like, I know a couple people that applied for that job, and I know a lot of people think it's just like one of the best jobs in the country because, like, you don't have to recruit. Everybody you coach is pretty good. You don't have to deal with a lot of the garbage of coaching. You just kind of deal with the good part of it. But what you have to be really good at is breaking down film or video, whatever. I'm old, but breaking down matches of your guys, and I'll say guys because he's just the guys coach, and then the key guys that you might have to beat from different countries. And so I think that's an underrated skill of that job. I think when I spoke to Bill Zadek and Joe Russell, they talked about how much film they break down. Like, for an example, like they talked about the lefty underhook series of the Iranians and, how they would attempt to stop that and the knowledge they're sharing. Like, it looked like Taylor had a really good plan for Yazdani the last time they wrestled, and can our other athletes learn from that and things like that. So anyway, I think that's something for people to be aware of, that job is not just punch your passport and get going. So U20s are the big tournament. So the men's results, United States takes second with 152 points. Iran has 165, 13-point difference. India was third at 102, so 50 points ahead of the third place team. America had 9 people place, and 8 of those first, second, or third. So to kind of go through the medals, Luke Lilladau, 57 Lilladau silver, 61 Bouzakis bronze, 65 Mendez silver, 70 Shapiro gold, 74 Messenbrink gold, Singleton 79 bronze, 86 Berge bronze, 92 Jack Dura 12th, 97 McDaniel bronze, 125 Christian Carroll 10th. GT, I don't know if you got to watch any of these, did you? Because I don't want to ask you about matches if you did not.
Sporadically. So yes, I did watch some, but once again, depending upon what was going on during that time period, I caught some, but I didn't catch all.
Any of the matches that you saw, because I'm going to talk about a couple that I saw, anything that really stuck out to you, especially on the American side?
I mean, I think as a general statement of the matches that I did see, not necessarily getting into specific, but our pace of wrestling at that age group was extremely impressive. Not a lot of standing around, just basically going after and getting it. You could definitely see a huge difference in strategy between pressing the pace or injury time, get out the cold spray. My shoelace has been undone. Those type of tactics by other wrestlers. I think the U.S. competed extremely proficiently at a very high pace. And I think that goes across basically all 3 of the styles. Cause once again, I don't just watch the men's freestyle aspect of things. The girls and Greco wrestled with the exact same kind of persistency and pace.
Right. And the girls are going now and the Greco will come. So we may talk a little bit about the women or girls. Marco, did you get a chance to watch some matches?
I did. I saw, I was able to see most of the finals, semis. So I look at it differently probably because I'm trying to compare where we're at now compared to where we were 15 years ago. And we're so far advanced where we were 15 years ago. And it's like we had said in the past on this podcast, and I truly believe this, is that our club coaches and all that has developed these kids at such an early age. And now we're going out and showing we are one of the best in the world. And we didn't win it, which is amazing considering we had 8 guys in the top 3, which is just blows my mind considering Russia was there, Iran was there, India's coming up strong, Belarus was there. So it just shows you where we're coming. I wanted to say on this podcast that this is the future of USA Wrestling, and it's a stronger future than what we have there right now in the senior level. But I can't say that. Yeah. I'm real close to saying that, David, because if you look 15 years ago when all those guys were wrestling in juniors, except for, Jordan Burroughs, because he's a little bit older, those guys weren't winning world titles. They were not competing like these kids are. We've only had a handful, maybe 5 guys that have won it, that age level when they were in high school. And you've got guys that are juniors in high school wrestling 18, 19-year-old men and competing and winning matches. So It's pretty impressive. So I'm not going to say it just yet, but that's what I'm thinking.
Well, I want to make sure I understand what you're saying correctly and reframe it. And then if you do, I think I'm going to agree with you. I think what you're saying is if you look at the credentials of these kids now, like Meyer Shapiro, Luke Lillidow, Mendez, all the guys that medaled, okay? And you go, okay, like compare Meyer Shapiro to, say, Yanni, okay? Yanni, you're saying at that age, coming out his senior year, coming out of high school, did not go win a U20 world title. Now, that doesn't mean that Meyer Shapiro is going to go win 4 D1 titles, although you picked him to win it, which we'll get to in a minute. But you're saying at the identical points in time, a lot of these kids have better credentials than even a Taylor, a Jaden, a Snyder, a Dake, a Taylor, Gilman, a lot of these, almost all of them, that just apples to apples, like year in life versus year in life. That if you're saying that, I think that mathematically that's probably true. If you just look at credentials and do the Pepsi challenge, that's probably true. I think the next question becomes which of these kids continue to develop, right? There's a saying that a lot of the best 12-year-olds in the world don't end up being the best 22-year-olds in the world or even in the country. So, but I think what you're saying is accurate. I had a couple observations. Number one, if you haven't watched the Luke Lillidow semifinal match, you need to watch it. He's down 1-0, then gets up 3-1. Then at the beginning of the second period, the guy takes him down with a head and heel. And I don't want to say fell into, but landed in 2 laces, and he's down 7-3. Luke gets a takedown 7-5. Then he gets in that side-by-side position where in college it's 2, but in freestyle it's not because the leg stepped over. And the guy Petersons him. So now he's down 9-5. And Luke's not an upper body guy, but he's underhooking. The guy kind of bases out. Luke goes around him and catches his arm. And this is, I think, goes to your point, but also GT's point about pace. This guy was so tired. If he was any less tired, he would have just pulled his arm out and based out. And Luke stepped over him, like the move. And, your coach goes, don't do that. Okay, pin him. And pinned him. So, really big win for him. He lost to the Japanese wrestler in the final who has senior level credentials. And that's probably the first time, because Luke's from around here. I'm friends with his dad and got to work with him when he was younger. The first time I saw somebody really stifle him. I don't think Luke touched the leg, but I mean, that guy's super good. The 79 kilo guy from India that Singleton lost to, I would like to see that guy's birth certificate. I highly doubt that guy's really 20 years old or younger. Based on facial hair, body development. And he just ran Singleton off the mat. I think if he hadn't gotten teched, he would have gotten DQ'd on the 1 caution ones. He just, ran him off. And then the other thing, Mark, I got to tell you, I look at Shapiro and I look at Messenbrink, and I know the old school guys want to say, well, it's not folk style. Well, the rules now are way more freestyle-y than they are folk style. Yep. Takedowns are worth 3 now. And so even if you can ride, if you can't turn, and the other guy's better on his feet, they're going to win. Messenbrink's pace, and his dad wrestled for us at Merrimack. He's a couple years older than me, the dad is. So I got to work out with him when I was in high school. I don't see how Penn State keeps him out of the lineup.
Agreed.
And I think a match that everybody would love to see would be Messenbrink and Keegan O'Toole, because they're both Askren guys. I think that would be a fascinating match. And I mean, Messenbrink, 74 kilos, which is, I think it's 162.8 GT, something like that. So I don't know if he can make 57. We don't know if Levi Haynes is, they got those 2 guys and Facundo. Facundo can't make 57, I think we're guessing. So it could go Haynes and then Messenbrink. It could go Haynes and then Facundo, or it could go Messenbrink, Facundo, or Messenbrink, Haynes. And those guys have some red shirts in there that they can use. But I think Messenbrink's going to be in that lineup, and I think he's going to be a factor even at 65, as good as 65 is. He's not going to wrestle too many 3-2 matches. like he's certainly beatable like everybody in the world, but you're going to have to beat him 10-8. You're not going to just get one takedown and like just shut him down, because he's going to keep firing. And he has really good to go back to Grant's original point. His pace is high. His hands and his feet working together are really impressive. And he fires off shots to both sides of the body and inside steps, outside steps, you know, head on both sides. Like he just keeps hitting you. Like if you're not in shape, like that's a nightmare. But he's not like the just pull on your head, get you tired, old school. Like he's pull on your head and fire, pull on your head and fire, reach like I'm going to pull on your head and then fire. So I can't tell if you're laughing what I'm saying, GT, or something else, but his volume is super high, right?
Well, why I'm giggling is that like, what a problem to have.
Yeah.
I mean, like Levi Haynes, Facundo, Messenbrink, Starachi, Truex, Brooks.
Yeah. Kirkfleet.
I mean, just like right there, right? I'm like
Van Ness, Bartlett, Nagao.
right, like, but you know, like just practicing with like, you know, kind of that, you know, like iron sharpens iron type mentality where like you all of a sudden it's like USA team training camp at U20s, U23s, and seniors are all in the same facility 12 months out of the year. So it's just funny in like a funny haha. Like definitely a really great problem to have if you're the Penn State coaching staff to determine, you know, kind of pick your poison, like with what you guys have access to, which is not everybody has those type of situations, specifically in college wrestling.
Well, like I said, I'm friends with John Messenbrink, and a year ago, or I guess, when Mitchell was a senior at the U.S. Open in Vegas, he had committed to CalBAP, and I talked to him and congratulations. And I said to him, I go, I'll be shocked if he finishes his career at CalBAP. And he kind of looked at me funny, and I go, and I mean that as a compliment. I said, I think he's a late bloomer. I think he takes the sport so seriously. And I said, I'm not saying they don't at CalBAP, but the amount of workout partners your son's going to need to hit his goals, I don't know if they can provide him. And I think he's going to realize that and want to leave. And then when I saw his dad this year, he's laughing. He's like, you were right. And I'm like, you don't have to be really smart to see, you know, how much. Like, I think he's the kind of guy that would rather be in a room where if he wasn't good enough to start, would rather sit than go to a mediocre program and start and not win. Like, I think he's the guy, like, I'm going to be in the program where when I'm good enough to start, I'm going to be ready to win. I think that's, you know, I don't know if you guys agree with that or not, but that's certainly the impression I get of him. Okay, so we have time. Let's talk about this. Anything else about the U20s overall? Shapiro's another guy. Pace is stupid high. Mark, you want to crow for a minute?
No.
Really?
I picked him to win it at 49 this year. I have no idea if he's wrestling 49. I'm hearing rumors he may be going 57. That will be a different transition for him. But if it's anything like what I saw this weekend, I don't think I would change my verdict. And I know I picked Iowa State's 57-pounder to win it, so I'm going to have to.
Okay, so
talk about pace. Can you see those two wrestling?
So who wins that? Who's your pick if those two guys are at 57?
Oh, wow. I'm gonna go Shapiro because I think he stays healthy. I don't know. I guess I got to go Shapiro. You know, the last impression I have is watching him basically derail that weight bracket at the Worlds, and how could you not pick him?
GT super early, Chittum, Shapiro. You got to go Chittum. You're an Iowa State guy, right? Like,
I mean, like, I haven't watched Chittum compete collegiately in a long time.
Right.
So I don't really know what he looks like. But I mean, if there's anything that I've like the reattacks and everything that Shapiro did.
Yeah.
I mean, I was always a guy that wrestled better inside Hilton, so we're a neutral site. We're
What a way to not answer the question. Where's the meat?
yeah,
Who sits on the mat first?
Who's the official? Is it cold outside?
What's the humidity level? The
Grant.
barometric pressure?
Hey, Grant, just to give you some advice early.
Yeah.
Cody Chittum is like an NBA basketball player bouncing a basketball, except it's a guy's head bouncing off the mat with his snaps. He's that good at it.
No, I mean, once again, I've watched him compete, but it's just like I haven't seen him compete collegiately,
Right.
And so I watched him do international stuff, but like internationally, once again, freshest thing in my mind is seeing, Shapiro freaking dominate. So
Recency bias for sure.
right, but in a collegiate system with the new rules and all that kind of thing, I think it gives itself leverage to Shapiro with takedowns, with a 3-point takedown, and once again, I didn't necessarily see a lot of like grinding abilities of Chittum when he did international stuff. Like, yeah, he was super, super talented, but I think his style is with that snapping and pulling and high pace, like, is more of kind of that folk style grind, which I think folk style is way different, man. Like, you gotta wrestle on the mat, but yeah, I'm gonna refrain from answering your question and just give you dialogue.
No. Well, one of the interesting things about the change in point system, which we haven't touched on, is it used to be if Grant got a takedown and I got a reversal, it was 2-2. It's not now.
Right.
Like now, it's the takedown guy is 3-2, and then if he gets away, it's 4-2. So it's the same difference as the 3-1. But I mean, like if somebody gets a takedown and the other guy even gets a reversal at the end of the period, you're still net 1 up. So that's interesting. Just quick peek. The guys coming back at 57, Sasso, Haynes, Humphrey, Franek, Ed Scott, Peyton Robb, Bryce Andoni, and Will Lewan. Those are returning All-Americans. 65, O'Toole, Carr, Amin, Griffith, Hamidi, Caliendo, Olenek. So, and then at 49 would be Van Ness, Parko, Caleb Henson, Brock Mahler. So
and Nebraska.
And Ridge Lovett, yeah.
Yep.
And probably Austin Gomez. He wasn't an All-American, but probably him.
Here's a thought, just out of the blue. Messenbrink, Shapiro, Chittum, all at 157 this year.
So that's an interesting question. So if you put
Not a
those
question, it's
guys
just an
in there,
observation. What if?
imagine those 3 guys to win nationals, or you get Sasso in the field. Who do you want?
Those 3.
GT?
I'll take those 3.
Oh, I thought you were going to ask about like barometric pressure. What the temperature in Kansas City is going to be in March.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Yeah.
you've been in Kansas City in March. It could be 6 degrees, could be 80 degrees.
That's true. That's
Like-
very true. Yes. Yeah. So that's a fascinating situation to follow. All right, let's talk about this Alexis Janiak match. So let's try to lay it out. And we were talking about this before we went on the air, and it was a good conversation. So I think we'll have it on the air. The basic gist of it is she was winning 8-4, gave up a takedown with like 15, 20 seconds left, or they gave up a takedown. They brought him back neutral, 15, 20 seconds left. Her opponent got her to the edge. She bailed, gave up a takedown, 8-8. They came back to the center, and there's like 5.5, 6 seconds left.
Yep.
Okay. And the girl's coming at her just wild, and she's backing out, but circling, not running, like not turning her back. And she wins the match. And then the other corner throws the brick, and they go caution and 1 after the match. So couple things to just kind of lay this out. Mark and I were, and I think I'm actually coming back your way, but your statement is you can't shouldn't be able to challenge something that didn't happen. And I gave the example, which is a bad one, of like, well, hey, if somebody hits a crotch throw and they don't give exposure points, you can challenge, hey, I think there should have been points. And your counterpoint or counter argument is, well, there was actually a move to decipher whether or not points were scored. And then GT and I brought up negative wrestling is considered an actual thing. And then Grant brought up, hey, with 5 seconds left and people are just swinging at you like crazy, it's not reasonable to expect you to just stand there and take it. And one of the things we touched on at the U.S. Open, though, we were like, hey, this caution in one, they're going to try to get the Americans with this. And unfortunately, we were right about that at the very least. So GT, you're sort of our our younger demographic guy, and B, our international guy. So thoughts on this specific exchange and call?
Well, let me put on my politically correct hat and know that it's not necessarily an American versus somebody else, and just look at it as a wrestling two athletes perspective. I don't believe that the negative wrestling aspect of that particular match, that there's nothing that you should have been able to do. If you watch the entire match, there was no negative wrestling on the one athlete's part that basically got called at the end. You know, basically did a good job, had enough points in the bag, gave up a late takedown as they go out of bounds, come back to the center. It really should, in my opinion, should have been an attention.
So explain to people that don't watch freestyle full time what an attention is. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to make sure people understand.
Well, I also kind of dislike the attention rule, because it's almost like kind of a warning to, like, hey, just don't do that anymore. But it stops the action, and they have to address the athlete to say, hey, please don't do that. Okay, back to wrestling. But it's like a formalized, hey, if you keep doing what you're doing, I'm going to hit you. Yeah. With whatever it is, a passivity, you know, whatever it is, a caution in one, going out of bounds, whatever it may be, right? So, and you can tell that the one athlete is very much in shape, still wrestling, but as you engage into an athlete with 5 seconds left, I'm not going to wade into somebody in order to, like, potentially give up a takedown with 5 to 10 seconds left.
Right.
You're gonna weather the storm. You're going to circle. You're not going to back straight up. You're going to wrestle and basically make contact. There was still contact, which is why I'm more probably angry with this call, is it wasn't just like push away and run. I mean, there was still like contact, like made contact in the tie, circle, contact in the tie and circle, which to me, what do you want the athlete to do? There is nothing else that the athlete can do besides maybe take a bad shot.
Yeah, give the match away, right?
Give the match away, maybe get to a control tie, maybe, if you can. But once again, like, you got 5 seconds left. Like, how much time do you have in order to dedicate to, like, getting to a control tie? Like, if you can snap and circle and snap and circle. I mean, once again, I would love to, I don't know, get somebody on here that would give me a better breakdown of what transpired, because it wasn't called in the center either. Meaning
so just to make just the referee in the middle called nothing.
He just says, nope, match is over. But then the challenge comes in. They have to all confer, which is the 3-man mechanics thing that we were talking about. But then that goes to, like, whatever the arbitrator official that is over, like, looking at a screen.
Right.
But that's, I would say that because of those pieces that I've already kind of laid out, that's not negative wrestling to me. It's just flat out. I believe that's the wrong call. I believe that everything about that, what transpired, was not correct. Now, once again, I'm very cognizant that I may not have a full referee's perspective or an official's perspective on how that should be called.
Right.
But I'm, being around the sport and watching a lot of international freestyle matches, I just don't think that constituted negative wrestling to a girl to lose a match due to that.
100% agree. So
if they want to call it, it doesn't matter, right? Like, hey, listen, it's 9-6. Okay, hit it. Who gives a care? But you're determining, and you're interjecting yourself into a dub. You're giving it away to somebody else based off of the call that you're making, which I believe to be the wrong call. But like, once again, I just don't think that it was the correct implementation of the rule.
So let me say this, Mark, and then flip it over to you. So number one, I would say this. I don't think the fleeing was, and I'm not picking on this other person, but a lot of people talked about this match. Her, quote, fleeing was not nearly as drastic as Diamond Guilford against Adeline Gray, because those were like straight backwards, out of bounds. One caution, one caution, one caution, one. And even though Gray was losing, she won the match by DQ. Second thing, I think, GT, what you're saying is it's really tough to go, I'm going to make this decision and change the winner of the match. Now, where I wouldn't have a problem with it is if, let's say, like all we had were shot clock points, right? Mm-hmm. Like 2-1, like you got put on the clock, I got put on the clock, you got put on the clock, I'm up 2-1, and no one's really done anything, and you just had to pick a winner, and now somebody's doing something late, and even though it's situational, because the person has nothing to lose, they're doing something, and you go, well, look, the other person didn't do anything, so it was a coin flip to begin with. But when you score 8 points, there's no way to fall bleep backwards into 8 points. Like, you had to do something offensive. I mean, the coaching lesson, but I hate this, is like, well, just don't give up the 2 takedowns, and then this point couldn't be taken away, right? Like, theoretically, if you give out step outs or something else, but that's super easy to say. It's like, well, just score more points. Like, don't let the referee be a part of it. Well, the other person's really good too. This is the world semifinals. This isn't the Eureka Quad. Like, I mean, and I'm saying a funny, but it's like, this is the world semifinals. Like, there's not a lot of bad wrestlers left at that level. Go ahead, Mark.
I guess my whole situation on this is that I always thought a challenge should have been something that had happened during the match, and you're saying that they made the wrong call, where nothing really happened here. She did not flee the mat. She never left the mat. She stayed, basically presented herself the whole 5 seconds, 5.5 seconds. They were actually touching each other for probably 4.5 seconds of that. So if they were actually engaged, I don't see it. And then you see these guys on the men's side that are going off the edge of the mat, and then they're sitting there for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and the officials are begging them to come back and continue wrestling, and there's nothing called. And yet you're taking a woman that should have been in the finals of the world, U20s, and putting her back in wrestling for a bronze. That's not right. I mean, it was the worst call I've ever seen in my life, because they're not consistent.
You bring up a really interesting point, how like these people can kind of take forever to get up on, like, after an out of bounds or like a grounded call, and there's nothing, there's no warning, there's no caution in ones. I shouldn't say none, but there's a lot of liberty. Like, if you do it forever, they'll hit you, but like, you can go a long time. So the one argument I would like to not hear, and I know none of us would make it, is like, well, no, she's young, she'll get another chance. Like, I think I mentioned this. I qualified for the cadet world team, and we boycotted, and I never qualified for a world team ever again. And I can't tell you how much it would have meant to me I know we weren't Nike then, but to wear the red, white, and blue of Nike or whoever it was back then, and whether I would have went 0-1 or 5-0, to be able to say I was on a world team, and if I had gotten hosed on some call like this, again, it's the only world team I would have made. So to be like, well, David, you were 15, which was when I made it. Like, well, okay, but I mean, it's like saying, like, okay, if she was 27, it would somehow be a worse call. And if she was 15, it would be a better call. Like that's irrelevant. So I hope people don't make that argument. Like this girl got cheated. She got hosed. It was a bad call and just wasn't right. And I'm sure people will say this is because we're American, but it's just an awful call, period. I think we just paid more attention to it because it was a USA wrestler, but it was an awful call, period. So we will talk about the women's results and the Greco results of U20s next week. So want to go to Helen Maroulis. She wins the special wrestle-off with Mota Pettis, 2 straight. Gary Abbott interviewed her afterwards. She did some different training methodologies, and I actually spoke to Fritz, who was in her corner. So I don't want like a real answer on this, but she made her 11th world team. How many people do we know for sure have made more than 11 world teams? And the only person I could come up with for sure is Baumgartner in America, American wrestlers.
What, Bruce made what?
He has 13 medals, so for sure he made at least 13 teams.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, is there anybody else? Like, I mean, John went 6 for 6. Burroughs has made, I would guess he's like at 11.
It'd be a very interesting concept because I want to say, was it 11 senior world teams? Because I think she's made a ton of
age group teams
as well.
Okay, so then that's a different conversation. So I don't know if they're all senior level teams, and if it is,
like, I'm pretty sure that, I mean, Helen's made a lot of those. Oh yeah, so Helen Maroulis makes her 13th world and Olympic. So then you take it, the Olympic year is a different year, right? So
yeah, I'm counting like worlds and Olympics together, like with Baumgartner. Like I count John as 6. He made 4 world teams and 2 Olympic teams. I'm counting that as 6.
Yep. So I would say probably Bruce is he's got to be about the only one.
Well, Snyder probably will, but he just hasn't done it long enough.
Adeline's close.
Got to be close. I mean, JB, he made his first team in 11. Okay, so 11, 12, and 13 would be 3, and then 10 more would be 23. But there's 2 teams he didn't make. He didn't make it when Dake was on the team, and he didn't make it when Marsteller was on the team. So that's 11. I think he's made 11. So anyway, unbelievable accomplishment. But so first, I mean, I think we all agree on that. I don't know if there's a lot of expounding to do, but I think most people know Lee Pritz and I are pretty good friends. And Helen's boyfriend was actually the other guy in the corner. Because I go, who is in the corner? And he started laughing. He told me, I go, what does he know about wrestling? And he goes, nothing. I said, okay. And I said, so how did that work? And he had a very interesting conversation with me that I'd like to share. And I think anybody that runs a Fargo or junior duels or like this needs to happen. He goes, every coaching situation at that level should have 3-man mechanics or 3-person mechanics. He said there should be an A coach who's actually coaching, yelling, talking to the athlete in between period. There should be a B coach who's making sure that the shot clock gets turned on when it's supposed to and off, make sure the points are going up correctly, is looking for things to challenge. In the case of a tie, knows who's winning, is toweling off, things like that. He goes, and theoretically, you should have a 3rd person on the other side of the mat that is looking at the match from the opposite side clearly, so that if a challenge things come up, they can do a signal like yay or nay on whether or not from their side of it, your side would win the challenge. This is like a peeve of mine. Like at Fargo, people just jump in people's corners. They don't know anything. They're talking over the top of people's primary coach. Like, I mean, I don't think this happened, but it'd be like a Pinnacle kid having Jared Lawrence or Brandon Paulson in their corner, and then somebody else from a local high school who's just trying to get in there and get shine, and then is trying to talk and say things. And there's at least one kid that's been in my event that I'm pretty sure got hosed in her semifinal match at Fargo because the wrong coach was talking. And this, again, there's limited opportunities in life to accomplish things. So I thought the three-man mechanics were interesting. I'm guessing I know your answer on this, Mark, but have you heard about anything like that in freestyle before?
No.
What
GT?
was that?
The three-man mechanics thing that Pritz was talking about having that third coach on the other side. I mean, you're literally at the Olympics. Is that something that is fairly commonplace for these kind of teams at this level?
Yeah.
It's really smart, right?
Yeah. Now, once again, I also have had situations where, like, you have one guy and then you have, like, you know, like whatever it is, like the old dude that just does the towel. It's like, well, yeah, there you go. And they're like, hey, you're doing a great job. I mean,
Are you guys saying that's what I should get? That's what I should do when I retire, Tom?
It's one of those things that it really just depends on the athlete too. Like, how many voices, what do you need to hear? Even if it's something, let's say, for instance, like you have something that you just need to hear every time at the break. Like, hey, you're world champ.
You're going to win this match. Yeah.
Right. Whatever it may be, maybe because Mark is in the corner and tells me that means more to me rather than whatever my technical guy that's like, hey, you quit leading your left foot, lead your right foot, move your hands, you know, whatever it may be. But I think it's really just dependent upon the athlete. And then you got like some weird dude that's like the janitor, and it's like, I need the janitor in my corner. I just need somebody that, like, I don't know, that tells me a good job.
Yeah. But your point is well taken that, like, if Mark says to me every time, David, when you're winning the hand fight and your left hand is always inside the tie, you're the world champ. And even if it's a different voice, if Mark says it to me than if Grant says it to me, that's fine. But there should be communication that, like, Mark's going to say this one thing and Grant's going to say the rest in that scenario or whatever it is. Because these people are talking over the top of each other. And almost always one coach knows the athlete better than the other, because you never see two coaches fighting about it. Like, you never see Ben and Max Askren talking over the top of each other. You never see Paulson and Lawrence talking over the top of each other. It's always somebody who's trying to get the shine, who's trying to put this photo on Instagram, you know, who's using it for recruiting purposes. And it just really bothers me, you know. So I just thought Pritz's perspective on it was super interesting, because I said to him, I said, well, did the kid keep track of the score? He goes, no. He goes, I was trying to do it all. So, and then we were joking about how, thank God she won, because, you know, Helen's won all this stuff, and then the one time you go with her, what if she had lost? You know, like, that's not a great scenario either. So, but congratulations to her. And if you watch the Maroulis interview, she talked about how strong Mota Pettis was, and, you know, what a good opponent she was. So I think her future is really bright. And, you know, Helen's obviously, I guess it's fair to say, on the second half of her career. I don't think she's going to make 23 world teams, you know. So, you know, I think somewhere she's, you know, past the 50-yard line, so to speak. So the U15 Pan Am trials also happened. Not going to run through all those people, but a bunch of kids medaled. I mean, USA Wrestling, this is, I think, where you really see how bright the future is, because, like, when you look at Super 32 or Ironman or these kind of tournaments in the regular season, it's hard to tell because there's no real high school national tournament like in folk style. Like, I guess it's Super 32 or Ironman, but there's kids that don't go to those. And then, you know, when you go to these kind of tournaments like Fargo, stuff like that, like even this year, some really good kids sat out of Fargo because they were on the world team, that kind of stuff. So when you're medaling at the Worlds, really in any style, any level, like, you're pretty dang good. Like, it's almost impossible to not be really good and do that. So the last thing I'd like to touch on is the Anthony Holman interview that my former coworker, Andy Hamilton, did when we were at track. He did it for Flow. And Holman's talking about Anthony Holman's the NCAA guy talking about different venues down the line for wrestling. So this is code for Minnesota is going to get one of the next 2 bids, just so people understand that. And in case people forgot, they got the 2 cities that got royally hosed because of COVID were Minnesota, because they didn't get to host it at all, and then St. Louis, because they had to hold it at 25% capacity. And I have no idea if they got 75% of their bid back or not, but like, you can't, they either took a huge bath or, somebody took a bath, the NCAA or the St. Louis Sports Commission or somebody. Minnesota did a bunch of work for nothing, which all of us have done in our life, but at least they didn't lose money. But I know obviously the NCAA was interested in using a football stadium, and I'm just telling you, the people I'm talking to, including sports commissioners of different cities, are saying, A, it's a 2-year cycle and not a 4-year cycle, and B, they fully expect Minnesota to get one of the bids. And so we talked last time about how that affects supply and demand of tickets, how that affects these clubs. Like, hey, well, you got to join the XYZ club to get access to the tickets. Also sight lines, enjoyability, all that other stuff. And the other thing people got to think about, which I'm not sure they have, is if you go from, say, 19,000 tickets to 38,000 tickets, you got to have hotels for 38,000 people now. Like, I'm not sure anybody's thinking about that. That's a situation. I don't mean to be like Jersey Shore, but like you got yourself a situation there. So it's going to be fascinating to see. The bids are going to go out in the fall and be announced in the spring. So my guess, I would bet heavily that Minnesota gets one of the 2 years, and it'll be interesting to see who gets the other year, and then they'll do the bid again. So the rest of the wrestling going on this week, like right now, we're recording this at 10:54 Central Time. The women's semis and medal matches, depending on day 1 or day 2, are going on right now. As GT has astutely pointed out, the women are always the middle days. Then the host country gets to decide if it's freestyle women's Greco or Greco women's freestyle. In this case, Greco is going last. So hopefully we'll have good news about the women and the Greco. There has been good news so far in the women, but rather than partially talk about it, we'll just get into it all aboard next week. So, and we're doing pretty good on time. We're just about at the end of the hour. Anything else from you guys before we boogie out?
No.
All good, my friend.
I'll tell you what, Iran has looked really good in the men's side, in the U17s and now the U20s, winning both of those. Pretty impressive. They've got a good program going right now. Russia has not looked as good, but I'm wondering how much of that is because they haven't been training, doing the things that they've done in the past. But I think the U.S. in the age group is showing that we're not going anywhere. We're just get stronger and stronger. So,
yeah, I think you said it right, Mark. Like, it's when you just look at the net results, like 8 guys in the top 3, and you're like, well, we had to have won, and we didn't. So, but also I had literally a scheduled call with Gary Abbott yesterday. He was very kind and complimentary about the work we're all doing. So anytime you get praise from the GOAT, you got to take it. So Gary, we appreciate you supporting us and encouraging us. And I think I've said this before, but when I first was doing these, Gary was like the first guy, he and Scott Casper, that literally called and gave me an attaboy. And when you're first doing this, you don't know if you're just kind of speaking to the universe and nobody's listening or not. So it was very, very kind. And, now we're here all these years later. So, all right, guys. So we'll talk to everybody next week, more U20s. And I think probably after that, we'll start sneaking into college previews, which Mark loves, Grant likes, and Gary would prefer we don't do. So for Mark and Grant, I'm David. Thank you guys for watching and listening. We'll see y'all next week.